Testing, testing, testing microphones, testing. Testing, testing, testing. Testing, testing, testing.
We had a chat before.
Okay, well, let's hope that's not. I'd like to call this meeting to order, if I may. We have a quorum. Dr. Grego, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so if we can move on to the consent items. Assuming all have read this and had an opportunity to review, do I have a motion to approve the consent items?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. The motion is passed. Susan, could I ask you, I know you said you had something that you wanted to, not now?
Nope, I think I can wait.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay, we'll wait then. Let's move on to action items. The approval and release of solicitation for the new strategically aligned program. Dr. Barbara Morrison Rodriguez, could you please share this with us?
I will, and
Good morning.
my colleague is going to give you the financials first, and then I'll follow with the substance.
So we're here to approve the release of the solicitation for the new strategically aligned programs. This is a multiple award that we're looking to seeking for a total of $3.75 million. It will be effective in fiscal year '23, and Barbara's going to give you a little details as far as the background and so forth related to it. Are you going to stay at your seat?
I am Laura,
Okay.
if I may. Thank you. Okay, the purpose of this competitive solicitation is to address unmet needs of Pinellas County children and families, increase efficiencies, promote inclusion by inviting the submission of letters of intent, our LOIs, from respondents who wish to provide new programming that is aligned with JWB's FY '21 to '25 strategic plan, and specifically is aligned with one of the three major result areas of early childhood development, prevention of child abuse and neglect, and/or strengthening communities. So I'll just say right now, this is phase one. We are going to have a phase two, which I will mention, which will address the early education components, and that they were timed specifically to be aligned with the school calendar. So for this first LOI, we're focusing on the following things: unmet need, that there are gaps in services for children and families, which have been magnified since the pandemic. Moreover, our current investments do not address all of the approaches and interventions that could be utilized. So we're really promoting innovation and new ideas here. The other intent of the LOI is for efficiency. This solicitation is intended to bring efficiencies in two ways. First, by increasing the breadth of services for children and families to most efficiently and effectively meet our strategic goals. And second, by the nature of the streamlined procure process itself, designed to award and implement a cohort of new interventions at one time. We're doing this by having a letter of intent process which will allow us to screen ideas which are being submitted, to assure that they are aligned with JWB's strategic goals and meet our other requirements. And that's before we ask people to develop a full RFP. So it saves time on the part of the person submitting the application, and it saves time for the staff from not doing full reviews of things that really don't meet our mandates and expectations. So the LOI is a more efficient process, and individuals and organizations who give us ideas that are aligned and we approve their LOI will be invited to go forward and submit a full proposal. And I'll give you the timeline for that in a moment. The other thing is we're focusing on inclusion. This solicitation is being issued through a lens of inclusivity, not only by the nature of the process itself, which is more streamlined, straightforward, and simplified, but also by listening to the voice of the community as to the best ways to intervene to serve children and families. So I mentioned that there will be two waves. The first wave has the following requirements, and as I said, it must be in one of those strategic areas. The requests for proposals are not for currently JWB-funded programs. They are not expansion dollars. They're for new initiatives and new ideas. I will just mention that the last time JWB did this kind of open solicitation was in 2016, and at that time, $3 million was budgeted and 41 requests were made, totaling $10.4 million, and 12 awards were actually made, representing $3.2 million. So we had 12 awards out of 41 solicitations at that stage. Our chair said, can you anticipate what we're gonna get? Absolutely no way. I hope we get a lot, and I hope what we get is really very much worthwhile. Okay, so let me talk about the process a bit. We have assigned review committees for each of the LOI areas for early childhood development, prevention of child abuse and neglect, and strengthening communities. Each of the review committees has a chair, an executive committee member that is assigned to it, as well as program area expertise, who are expert in that particular area of the program, and also representation from the evaluation section. So those teams have been formed. We're going to be, we've had some orientation training just yesterday in the process. So let me review the minimum criteria that must be met for the LOI to be considered for further evaluation. Certainly that it comes in the due date and on time, that the submission form is signed by an authorized officer. Respondents may only submit LOIs for up to 2 programs per entity. So if they have 2 innovative ideas, they could submit an LOI for both, but only up to 2. Each request must be performed within Pinellas County for the benefit of children below the age of 18 or their families. They must be aligned with JWB's strategic goals of early child development, prevention of child abuse, neglect, and strengthening communities. And our strategic plan is on our website, so any interested entities, that would be a very good place for them to start by reviewing our strategic plan. For new programming, the entity must not receive funding already from JWB. It must be a minimum of a $100,000 request. It must not be something under the jurisdiction of the public school system. Requests that closely resemble a planned competitive procurement or are already available by another source will not be considered under these LOIs. In order to qualify, a recipient organization must be in business for 5 years or more, or have an annual operating budget over $5,000, which operates under an administrative services organization, or ASO, or a collaborative, unless it demonstrates to JWB's satisfaction that it has the resources to properly administer the JWB funding in accordance with all requirements. They must have 3 years of audited financial statement summaries and the notes to the financial statement or an individual tax return and personal financial statement of net worth for the most recent year if the proposer is an individual proprietor, privately held company. So I'm going to give you now the schedule of when, as I said, there will be 2 waves. Right now, I gave you the detail on wave 1. So the letter of intent for this wave for PCAN, early childhood development and strengthening communities, will be released on today, right? No, tomorrow. Tomorrow, February 11th, right. Okay, that's like fast. There's going to be a pre-submittal conference, which is optional for people to come and ask questions. That will be on March 9th in this conference room on March 9th. The deadline for submission of the LOI is by noon on March 11th. The complete LOI submission date is, March 11th is for receipt of questions. The actual LOI must be submitted by April 11th, okay? And then the award of the grants, upon approval by the executive committee and the board, will be on June 2nd. So that's a pretty aggressive timeline. So we're looking to start them in June. As I mentioned, there'll be a phase 2 LOI and RFP process for school readiness and school success, but that will not launch until August. So the release of invitation to respond for those 2 other areas will be on August 1st. There's going to be a pre-proposal optional conference to address questions on August 12th, and the deadline for receipt of questions will be on the 17th of August, and then the due date for the Wave 2 LOIs, and that would be for our early education programs, will be on October 3rd of 2022. Okay? And the board will approve the funded programs will be on December 8th of 2022. So that's the schedule for the LOI 1 and the LOI too.
Just a clarification on the recipient requirements. Barbara indicated that they had to be in business for 5 years, and then she said, or have an operating budget of 500, and it's and.
And,
They need to
okay.
have both of those. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Laura.
The organization needs to have been in business for at least 5 years.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank you for the presentation. Do I have any questions from the board? Yes.
So, thank you very much for the presentation. So how I'm reading this is that if we're funding an individual or company now, and they want to expand and things are going really well, they can't under here if it's the same exact program.
That's correct. It must be
Expand that.
something new. Mhm.
Yeah. And we're okay with that.
Yeah, what I would note, and that's a great distinction, is that if that's the desire, if there is unmet need, and there is an organization who's willing to expand an existing program, that's a discussion that we want to have with them in, say, February to April, so that we could add that to the ongoing budget, but it would not be part of this process. And so, for instance, we are reaching out in a very intentional way, for instance, with our out-of-school time providers and our early childhood providers, knowing that that they are all struggling with retention, with recruitment and retention. And we're initiating an effort with them to talk about what they need to do and if budgets need to be increased in order for them to, I won't even say expand capacity, but actually work at full capacity.
And then the other, so what I'm interpreting this and from your phase 1, phase 2 is that, and maybe I'm confused by it, is that the intent of the announcement of this will not be almost a year from now. Is that, am I reading this correctly? December?
Is that for the first?
Are you talking about December would be the second wave?
Second wave?
So we have 3 strategic areas that are in the first group. The second group are our education programs, the 2 education-focused areas that we have.
And those will not be awarded, is that the December date?
Yes.
Okay. I just find that, there's such a need out in the community. December seems like it's a really long ways away. Not sure if there's anything we can do to speed up the proposal announcement and securing these things so we can.
I think the
help our
thinking was
children
to
earlier.
allow the programs to begin aligning themselves with the school schedule, was the distinction we made.
Well, then, to do that, I would suggest that we get as many things done before the end of this year, like in June, so that we have a full summer. It is a cyclical business, you're absolutely right. So what I was always in tune to is that the summer, people would have resources and things to do to knock it off, not to really get started, so to speak. Because then you got to wait a whole another 12 months to get that same exposure to a summer. So if that's just a thought of timing, where you're absolutely right, the timing of when students are in school and out of school, that would be really beneficial to these dollars to go to the greatest use and not wait another year.
Yeah, it's, the procurement process takes a lot longer than many of us would wish. But because of all of the notices we have to give and the timelines we have to give, it tends to take longer. Now, I will say, using the letter of intent and then the request for proposal extends the timeline.
Right.
We do think, however, it's going to minimize the amount of effort on both agencies and on us to do the work of getting to that point. Because completing a full proposal is a huge effort, and the decision to use the LOI process and kind of go in 2 phases was so that we didn't waste time of agencies where their concept or their idea really wasn't one that we thought was either evidence-based or evidence-informed that we wanted to pursue, or we didn't believe it really fit with our, with our process.
I
but
know
I-
I've repeated these comments over the years, so maybe you'll not hear from me again with that. But I think that if we can explore state agencies, us, we all do this in a much more streamlined way, that maybe we can learn from a different agency of how to perhaps consolidate the timing so we can get these resources and services out to the children who need it in a more rapid fashion and still not sacrifice quality in the process. So that's all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I guess just one question I would have based on what Dr. Grego has just explained. Would it be, I would ask, would it be possible to look at moving the start time of phase 2 as far as the process up? So if we're in, if we started it instead of in August, if it were possible to move the start maybe into May, or to get the process of evaluation and selection, so that we might be able to begin, we might not be able to begin in the beginning of the school year, but if we started in, October of that second phase, October, November at the latest, we've lost, 1 or 2 months. Is that a possibility?
That's certainly something we can look at. When we laid out this timeline, we were trying to be cognizant of all the folks that were involved in all the different meetings and all the required public meetings and so forth, but we can certainly take a look at that.
Yeah, we have relatively limited bandwidth in procurement. And it's not only the people in the procurement department, but it's also all of the people across the organization who need to be pulled in above and beyond their regular duties. And so there was a lot of work in scheduling all of this out and literally looking at who was going to be committed when, because we find it's just incredibly burdensome when we do these processes. The rest of the work still needs to get done, so.
I guess the only question I'd still have on that is the issue a limitation in the staff to complete the documentation, or is it more broadly of trying to collect and find the right people, the right organizations to do that?
I think it's more our internal capacity that, the very same people who are doing a lot of other jobs, frankly, on an ongoing basis, or procurements that are not this large but just require 3 bids or, that sort of thing, then are also thrown into something that each one of these procurements takes a huge amount of time for each of the people assigned. And we just don't have an incredibly deep bench within the procurement department, for one, but because we also, as Barbara noted, want to bring in other people from the organization to be part of the scoring, the evaluation committee, for different reasons, but in particular, bring in people who have content area expertise. They functionally really can't be involved in 2 teams simultaneously. I would say that.
I would add that it's probably a combination of both, because if this is a new innovative program that they've developed, they're going to need adequate time to actually put the program together, to crunch the numbers, to do all of that, which, we may have to go.
The agencies.
The
that apply.
agencies. We may have to do some back and forth to make sure. So the LOI process, phase 1, as Barbara described, gives us a first blush to say, okay, we want to request an actual full RFP. And then the RFP, and then we'll still go through it, and there's still going to be probably some dialogue and discussion, so forth. So we were trying to be cognizant of both the providers or the outside agencies as well as the internal staff. And as Beth indicated, the internal staff, we also align not only the program consultants and evaluators in looking at these, but we've also got the financial folks involved in this. And when you have 3 or 4 financial folks and you spread them out to all of these different proposals. It is time-consuming.
Okay, Dr. Grego and then Commissioner Drawer.
Yeah, quick question. Are you excluding some after letter of intent to apply for the actual, so you're saying to some they cannot
Correct.
Yeah.
based on their letter of intent?
Right, so the LOI process, and if they didn't score a 65, and if we didn't think it aligned with our strategic plan, they would not be invited to submit.
If you write the request in a detailed way, enough detail, you should be able to eliminate that.
Yeah, we
in my
hope so.
opinion, so.
I just want to suggest from my grant writer history, the timing for the school-connected programs would be much better in the spring than spanning over the summer, because it's impossible to get anybody in the school system in the middle of the summer. So there's no coordination that's going to happen until school starts again, and then a couple of weeks after that, till they get going again. So it would almost be better to flip the, not to totally put a wrench in the works, but in terms of timing for a program like that, it would work much better in the spring.
Yeah, and we were sort of working backwards from, and correct me if I'm wrong, Barbara, but to assure that we were able to do the contract, to execute the contracts in the spring, mid-spring, which then gave time to implement the program by the first of a school year. You know, knowing that, to your point, a lot of people aren't around during the summer, but that most school success programs or early school readiness programs do need to be tied, are best tied to a school year, not hitting in October or November or some other time.
Ms. Ronks?
Yeah, so just to clarify, phase one is the letter of intent. And if you, in June of 2022, if you score 65 or higher, and we feel you meet our strategic goals, you will then be invited to do the RFP. So I guess my question is, and then the award, no matter what, whether you move on or you don't move on, no awards are being done till December. So I didn't know if Dr. Grego was suggesting that the awards be moved up, or if we're suggesting that the RFP be invited to be done as immediately in June, and then move the award up to like October. I don't know if that's the suggestion or what the issue is with the timing.
It's on. It's on now, okay. It was my impatience, I guess, to want to move this thing on as fast as we possibly can, because we know the importance, was to ask to see if we could accelerate the second part so that we could get it into the October timeframe. You know, the first phase to me is one where you're really searching and finding the right organizations to participate. The second one is you already know who they are. Now it's more of the process of getting them in line to what we're thinking and then making the selection. I know that's a bit different from a business perspective than it is from sometimes the school systems and the other side. So that was that was my kind of interjection, not necessarily Dr. Grego's request, but I still would like to see if there's any way for us during this process to accelerate it sooner, to get that behind us so that we can begin as whenever the appropriate time is to begin to execute the program. That would be my wish anyway.
So can we make a motion to approve the release of the phase one LOI for tomorrow, and then ask the staff to come back next month to see if they can accelerate the phase two process?
Is that your
Or
motion?
shorten the phase one process, and so, yeah, I mean, if that's gonna get us moving,
Okay.
then that's what I think we
All
should
right,
do.
so we have a motion. Do we have a
You
second?
have a second?
We have a motion and a second.
I think we need to hear from staff on that, on whether that's possible, because if you look in the packet, the motion is being asked for you to approve the release of this item that's in your packet, and what's in your packet already sets forward all the phase two dates. So I'm not certain how we could honor the motion that you've suggested. Does staff have any comments, Laura? I mean,
Right, and this is just to remind you that this release is just for the 3 areas that we're talking about. It's not the school success or the school readiness. This is just the PCAN and the strengthening organization and early development. Colleen brings up a good question
Okay.
that the,
Commissioner?
Yeah, I think I was reading that wrong before. So when does the second round come out then? Is that going to be another full year?
I don't have that in front of me. I don't know.
I have it. So, let's see. Phase 2,
No, not round 2.
Well, the second round.
yeah. Letter of intent. Looking for the full second round. Let me get my schedule.
Okay, so I think from what Colleen is saying, there's two different things. There's phase 1 and phase 2 for 3 strategic areas. And then
Right.
there are other strategic areas that are not being released at this time
That is
I
correct.
was just going to invite
So
That's what
there
I
is,
was asking, though. When
Diana
is
in.
that?
one is the second one.
Diana, you want to go to the podium? Right. Diana has joined us, and she could probably clarify a few things. I think some of it has to do with terminology, when we're saying phase 1,
Okay.
phase 2, and so on and so forth. But
Okay, Diana, the floor is yours.
The school readiness and school success is scheduled to come back to you guys in April to approve the release, to be awarded in April of next year. So it would be awarded in the spring so that they could start in time for the school year.
So 23, okay.
But are you saying you would bring it right back, April of '22 for implementation in April of '23?
April 22 is when the next RFP, this next
Wave.
RFP, LOI, RFP, whatever you want to call it.
Is released,
It's going to be released for the other 2.
based
areas.
on our approval?
Correct. You'll read it in April, you'll give your approval on those 2 strategic areas. The one that's before you today is
It's for the
Right.
first 3.
I got it.
What I'd maybe request is if you could approve as presented, this process for the first 3 strategic areas, but that, today as an action. However, that we have heard loud and clear your desire and Dr. Grego's comment about, gee, I mean, I'm not using your words, but how come everybody else can do this faster? You have to, all of the governmental entities have to go through these processes. Is there a way we can make our process, not the LOI and the RFP part, but just the whole process that we do faster and learn from others? And I don't want to speak for Diana, but some of it, my guess, is going to be limitation of personnel. But if that's the case, we need to come back to you and tell you that. And that that's a choice that you may want to say, well, let's add somebody to, in particular, the procurement department itself. That's not the only place the burden is. I want to be clear about that. But we hear you loud and clear that you'd like to see these things happen more quickly. And we can come back to you after we've had a chance to talk kind of offline about what would that take and what could we do differently.
Okay, so the first motion is not, it's not an acceptable one, is that correct?
Well, we can ask Brian if he'd like to withdraw his motion.
Brian, would you like to
Someone else
withdraw
can
your
make a new
motion?
perhaps?
Yeah, if that's what y'all want to do, sure.
Okay, now,
A
okay,
year
so
just seems like a long time to award something to me.
I'm in
but
agreement.
That's my final comment.
So I guess as a second, I would, withdraw along with Mr. Ongst. I guess I really want to be forceful in the opinion that this is the work of JWB. And I think it would be important to see what are the obstacles in the way of doing what I think you're hearing around this table is the work of JWB. And what is it that's getting in the way of us not being able to fast forward some of these releases of money to impact the children that we want to serve the most. So point made and moving on.
okay, so we're back to a motion.
Motion to approve the release of
Sorry,
the.
Mr. Bartlett?
As I understand this conversation, which I honestly am kind of getting a little lost here, back and forth with the phase 1 and phase 2, but I thought phase 1 was going to be released, be done in June, so that we'd have that be able to implement for the following school year. And then the next one would be done sometime during the next school year, April, I think you said, what, 23?
No.
But that's not it. It's
No.
gonna wait for everybody to get together? Well, I don't see how we can, if we approve this to be released with all these timelines you have in here, it'd be incorrect if we go ahead and scooch up closer this phase 2 part of it.
That's
So
correct.
we can't approve this and send this out like this and have these people believing these are the dates they're gonna have to honor. Because they gotta create a program. We gotta tell them what we're looking for, and they don't have this program. It's not like a lot of them that we feed. As Dr. Greco pointed out, this is a whole new idea. So they've gotta do that. It's gonna take some development. time.
Right,
We're gonna get
exactly.
the logistics to be worked out. And I just don't want to rush into something and be moving so fast that we kind of cut corners and then we don't end up with a good quality finished product.
Yeah.
I don't see why we can't do a 1 and get it out and then do a 2, and try to meet the school year demands with it.
But that
Done
is
like
the
that.
way it's laid out.
But in any event, we're going to kill a month right now if we don't approve this. But I don't see how we can if we change the dates. That's
Yeah,
my
and this
story.
is a different kind of procurement than if we, for instance, procure an early childhood development program and we specify exactly what we want. Here, it's sort of a blank page, and to your point, Mr. Bartlett, that the agencies need time to think about what it is they're going to present and flesh out to some degree, even for the LOI, what that's going to look like and why that will make a difference.
Mr. Ongst?
So based on everything I've heard and the fact that we're asking for new ideas and we're not specifying a specific need, I'm comfortable with this, and I move to approve item 3A.
Second.
I will second that.
Any other discussion? If none, do I have a motion? I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Those who disagree, say no. Okay, then we've approved it.
Thank you.
I do have one last comment, though, that I would ask that as you go forward, if you're able to see an acceleration, please do. I know this is a brand-new program, and I know that it's not been done anywhere else before, but as we spoke earlier, Barbara, studies have been done for over 30 years in this space. There's data out there that we can capture, use, and help create, I believe, the right programs without sacrificing anything. So if there's a possibility to accelerate to do this, I think it only benefits those children that we're trying to so desperately help.
The only caveat I would have to that is those of us internally who know the research and the literature, but we're also going to be asking programs for innovative ideas, which means they have to be familiar with that research and that literature because we're requiring them to use evidence-based or evidence-informed. So some of them will have a learning curve. They may have a very, very creative idea, but they need to understand the scholarship, which undergirds that. I think what we're doing here is, and I would, in defense of the 0 to 3 area, because that's what my heart is, I mean, that we have a whole area which needs full-blown development. And there, as you know, there's a lot of coverage in the press about stress on families and the quality issues in early childcare. What we want is we want an expedited process, but we want a quality process. And it does take time to do that, particularly if this is a new area of programming for them.
The other point I would make is that by doing what I'm calling an open solicitation process, in other words, they have to be strategically aligned, but we're not directing, we want to see this kind of program or that. Each one of those, when we do a very specific program with a specific scope of work, I'll just sort of say per dollar put out in the community or per impact put out in the community, those take longer. This one may cover a variety of programs in all 3 strategically aligned areas. So yeah, there is an extended time, but if we'd done one at a time, it would have been stretched much, much longer.
Okay, well, thank you again for your updates, and I think we need to just move on forward. Let's go to action item B, which is to approve the award of Vistra Communications LLC for Early Childhood Public Awareness Campaign. Laura and April.
Good morning. We are excited to be here today. It all started, as you recall, with the board approving a new strategic goal to launch an early childhood public awareness campaign, and that is to promote and support parents, grandparents, and caregivers as their child's first teachers. This is part of our 5-year strategic plan. From there, we seeded a 0 to 3 think tank. We held multiple discovery sessions with its members. We developed a procurement, and then we presented it to you as the board for approval and release last October. We also seated an evaluation team that was comprised of think tank members and other communications and early childhood experts. And then the competitive procurement itself yielded proposals from creative firms throughout Tampa Bay, the state of Florida, and frankly, across the country. 2 proposals rose to the top, and we had a 2-round evaluation process. Ranking highest was Vistra Communications, whom we are recommending today for the award. A little bit about Vistra. Why Vistra? Vistra was established in 2007. They are a minority and veteran-owned business right here in the Tampa Bay area. They're headquartered in Lutz. And they have very active owner involvement. They're a full service, about 115-person firm, and they have vast experience creating, and launching social change campaigns throughout Tampa Bay. They really understood how to reach targeted audiences, and they really understood that while we have a universal message and universal approaches, that we also needed to have sub-messaging and different approaches, what they called hyper-local marketing approaches, to reach those harder-to-reach audiences. And I know that was all of the concern here. So they mentioned work with churches, they mentioned boots-on-the-ground outreach, using all of our assets that we already have through our neighborhood family centers, et cetera. They have a very diverse project team, including bilingual staff, and they also really understood the importance of formative and concept testing, formative research and concept testing. They have something called VLab, which really gets into, how do we test the concepts and the campaigns to know that they're really going to resonate and work. And then they have experience with local early childhood development, education firms, and also foundation clients. So today we are recommending Vistra Communications, and I'm going to let Laura tell you a little bit about the budget impact.
Thank you, April. There was a lot of time and effort had been put into these proposals, as well as reviewing them and evaluating those. We had a budget of $125,000 for this campaign, and the award that we are seeking is in the amount of $210,000, which comes in right at our dollar amount. This would be for a 6-month period for them to kick out the campaign and materials and so forth. There's an option in there for 3 one-year renewals, and at an hourly rate of $148 for additional services or items that we may need. But this piece right here is to get the campaign up and going and to come up with recommendations and so on and so forth. So we're here to seek approval for the Early Childhood Public Awareness Campaign to Vistra Communications.
Do I have any questions from the board? Seeing none? Brian, did you have one? I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, Commissioner. I got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion's approved.
Thank you.
Let's move on to the presentations. Domestic violence update. Oops, yeah, I'm looking at the right one. Domestic violence update. Megan Seals. Who is ill? Oh, I'm sorry. Who is ill? Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. That's right. We heard about that. So Karen Bogus is taking her place, and then followed by Loriana. Good to see you, Loriana.
Good morning, Karen Bogus. I'm Chief Program Officer, and no, I'm not Megan Seals. Unfortunately, she was not able to be here this morning, so I will be sharing this presentation with all of you. Today, we will be providing an update on JWB's programming in the domestic violence arena, and then we will turn it over to Lariana Forsythe, CASA's Chief Executive Officer, who will provide an overview on the Family Justice Center coming to Pinellas County. Okay. Oh, you got the first slide. Domestic violence, or DV, is acts of intimidation, physical or sexual assault, battery, and other abusive behavior as part of a systematic pattern to gain and maintain control of an intimate partner. Domestic violence is not just a physical or sexual violence, but also includes threats, including emotional and psychological abuse. The frequency and severity of domestic violence can vary dramatically, but the intention is all the same, which is control. Domestic violence is prevalent in Florida. 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men, and 1 in 15 children have been involved in it. Out of 67 counties in Florida, Pinellas is the 5th highest for DV offenses. And as you can see in the bullets, domestic violence happens more in Pinellas County than robbery, rape, murder, vehicle theft, burglary, and aggravated assault. Domestic violence has traumatic and tragic consequences. Domestic violence and substance abuse are consistently the 2 top reasons for children's removal in Pinellas County. In fact, 32% of child removals in 2021 were a result of domestic violence. Also in 2021, 4 Pinellas children were present during domestic violence homicides, and over the last 10 years, 93 lives were lost due to domestic violence. So this is why our investments in domestic violence services are so important and critical. You can move to the next slide. Here we have an overview of our JWB-funded investments in the domestic violence arena. These investments include a range of services: prevention, intervention, and residential. And along with Lariana Forsythe in this room, and I know she has some of her staff here as well today, we have Tracy Weeking, Vice President of Abuse Services at the Haven with Hope Villages of America. And I know Gulf Coast Legal Services are watching online right now. So the 3 programs we fund in this category totals just over $1.5 million and serves almost 3,000 participants in fiscal year 2021. Next slide, thank you. When domestic violence programs are discussed, the first thought is often emergency shelter, and that, of course, is a critical service for the safety of survivors and their families. But as you can see with the 3 programs we fund, we have a continuum of services, not just emergency shelter. Prevention services are for children and youth pre-K through high school. The younger ages learn about conflict resolution, de-escalation skills, and safety tips, while older youth are learning about dating violence and what healthy relationships can look like. Intervention services are offered both to shelter residents and non-shelter residents, include safety planning, support groups, and many types of different advocacy roles. Advocacy in the DV arena is similar to case management, including legal advocates that walk alongside survivors through legal processes and court hearings. Finally, residential services, which include 2 certified domestic violence shelters in our county and other housing supports for long-term success. So here is some of our data from fiscal year 21. I just want to everyone to keep in mind that there are specific statutory regulations for this population that limit the data that is available for us to do analysis on, and this is for the safety of the survivors. So across all services in this area, 31% of participants were children in 2021, and specifically in shelter, that percentage rose to 63% for children. Another thing to note is mostly females were served, with only 17% males and a small percentage identifying transgender females and males. To the next slide. Thank you. More than half of the participants identified as white, and the majority of participants reported that they were not of Hispanic ethnicity. Now we will review the outcomes. This is not all the results for these programs, but this represents key results that we believe are important to share here today. And so the first is in the area of prevention. Positive changes in children's behavior is continually seen by both teachers and parents at the conclusion of services from the social emotional curriculum that they receive. In intervention services, cases were positively resolved 100% of the time. And some examples of this are successful divorce cases, gaining custody of children, resolving housing issues such as lease termination. In residential services, 100% of adults completed safety plans prior to leaving shelter. And this is critical to the safety of survivors and their children, being that research shows survivors at 75% or greater risk of being killed after leaving their abusive relationship. High rates of children assessments were completed prior to leaving shelter. This is essential to properly assessing the wraparound services that are needed, such as mental health services to address the trauma that has occurred. And now I will, if there's any questions? And I will now transition to Lariana. You could just leave this on.
Thank you, Karen. All right. Well, thank you so much for your continued investment in CASA's work here in the county. And thank you for the opportunity to share with you information about the Family Justice Center this morning. So before we get started, I do want to just orient you a little bit. I have provided a packet of information. Couple of things I just want to share. You all talk about ACEs, right? And the effects of trauma and other types of things on children. I want to point out there are 10 ACEs, as I'm sure you all know. 3 of the 10 ACEs actually fall under the legal definition of domestic violence. A 4th ACE, emotional abuse, I would argue, doesn't happen, or it does have to happen if one of the other types of abuse are happening. So children who are living in domestic violence situations are coming to the table with at least 2 ACEs to start. A lot of these other ACEs co-occur when there's domestic violence as well. So when we're talking about taking care of the children in our community, we know that this is a very vulnerable population. The second thing that I'd like to orient you to is this piece of information right here. When people talk about CASA, we talk about our services. Karen did a great job of explaining a lot of what we do, but people typically think of shelter. Shelter is a service that is really only utilized by a small percentage of people who need domestic violence services. So this one sheet just shares a little bit of information about the other programs that we offer. We do a lot of housing with the HLA, a lot of child welfare work, legal programs, etc. So, I'm here today to talk about the Family Justice Center. I wish I could tell you that it was my great idea. It is not. It was started 20 years ago in San Diego. It was started by a man named Casey Quinn. He was the elected city attorney. And he saw a huge need. He saw survivors not getting the services that they need and therefore not being successful. And so what I'd like to do is show you a quick video about what some of the problems are that survivors face. We could cue the video.
I recommend that you get an injunction. Take this packet and call this number.
Thank you.
I need an injunction.
Okay. Do you know what kind of injunction you need?
I don't know. The police officer said I needed an injunction. I don't know what kind.
And then the police showed up and arrested him.
like such a good guy. What are you gonna do now?
I don't know. I have to go back to the courthouse tomorrow.
All right, here's your approved temporary injunction. Keep it on you at all times, okay?
Hello?
Hi, this is Child Protective Services. We received a report that there was a domestic violence incident that your child witnessed. We're gonna need to set up a time to meet with you.
Yeah.
Can you give me a detailed account of what happened that night?
So, my husband came home from work, and he was just so mad, and he grabbed me.
For charges of false imprisonment and domestic battery by strangulation, the defendant pleads not guilty. Trial will be set late next month.
Let me see.
Hi. My son has never been accused of anything like this before. What are you going to tell the judge?
Hello?
Hi, this is the police department calling in regards to the incident last week. We need you to attend and invest.
Can you tell us what happened last Tuesday at approximately 7 p.m.?
My husband came home from work, and we were watching TV. Hello?
This is a call from an inmate at the Pinellas County Jail.
I'm so sorry. Typically a retainer with our firm for divorce is like $2,000, and it's going to be an additional $200 an hour just to get that done for you.
Joseph has been acting out in school. Is everything okay at home?
Hello?
This is a courtesy call. Brandon Smith has been bonded out of the Pinellas County Jail.
For the typical survivor of domestic violence in Pinellas County, they'll need to travel 20 times, tell their story 17 times, fill out 289 pages of paperwork, 53 hours of missed time from work, all while managing everyday priorities such as taking care of the children, working, school, paying bills, all while having to process and deal with their trauma from experiencing the most difficult situation of their entire life. Next slide, please. This is an example of what this looks like for the survivor. It's very chaotic, it's confusing, you don't know what you're supposed to do or where to get the help that you need. Next slide, please. I have decades of nonprofit experience, but most of it's with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Arizona. But as a survivor of domestic violence, I'm extremely passionate about changing the domestic violence paradigm. So a few years ago, my senior director of programs, Sherry Cluster, who's right here with us, She's had more than 12 years of experience in victim services, including Mr. Bartlett's office, the AG's office, St. Pete Police, and so much more. She came to me one day and she said, you know, if we really want to change services for survivors in Pinellas County, we'll take a look at the Family Justice Center concept. So once she introduced it to me, I was like, yes, this makes sense. This makes sense for our county. But we needed to prove that our community was ready and that CASA was ready to serve as both the convener and a provider of programs. And so we worked for the last 2 years with an organization called the Alliance for Hope International. It's run by the gentleman that I told you about earlier, the creator of the very first Family Justice Center in San Diego, Casey Quinn. And after 2 years of evaluation and planning, much of which JWB was involved with, the verdict is in. Pinellas County and CASA is ready for a Family Justice Center. So now you're all wondering, well, what is the Family Justice Center and how is it going to change services in Pinellas County? We have a lot of great services here. We have a lot of really great partners doing a lot of really great work. It's very complicated. And as you saw, it's very complicated for survivors to access those services. Excuse me. So rather than expecting the survivor to somehow miraculously know what they're supposed to do and where they're supposed to go, we turn the model upside down. The Family Justice Center is a co-located center where survivors come to the center, they walk in the door, child care is available for them, they don't need to worry about that. The children are taken care of, they're safe. They're escorted to a private living room environment that's decorated in trauma-informed flowers and couches and all of those wonderful, nice things. They are introduced to one case manager who hears their story one time, fills out one piece of paperwork with all of the information, and that case manager is then helping them understand what does the process look like for them. According to what happened to them, what services do they need? So let's say they need to fill out a police report. There's police on site. They come to the living room where the survivor is. Case manager is helping them fill out that paperwork. Let's say they are interested in prosecuting. State's attorney's office has attorneys there, or an attorney, that will help them through that process. Mental health services on site for both adults and for children. Legal services, IFP team is there. Gulf Coast that we talked about a little bit earlier, they have a family law, they have an immigration law attorney on site. So all of these services are there, and the navigators are helping the survivor understand what it is they need and directing those services to them that very day. So we're removing all of the trauma from the system by bringing it to the survivors. Next slide, please. This is the plan of what it all looks like. That's in the little book that you have in your folder here. Next slide. This is the list of anchor partners who have committed to be involved in the Family Justice Center. You can read through the list. You don't need me to do that for you. But all of these folks are on site to make sure that the survivor and their children are getting access to all of the programs that they need. Okay, next slide. The site of the Family Justice Center is conveniently located. Our current administrative offices are very close to the St. Pete Police Department, obviously a key partner, very close to the courthouse down the way. We have been able to relocate our administrative staff, so the existing CASA building will become the Family Justice Center. In Pinellas County, of course, domestic violence happens throughout the entire county. St. Petersburg Police Department does have the highest rate of domestic violence happening in its jurisdiction, followed second by the Sheriff's Department. Okay, next slide, please. All right, I'd like to introduce you to Gabby Lopez. Gabby Lopez right here will be the director of the Family Justice Center when we open for a soft opening June this coming year and a public launch in October. Gabby is a master's level social work therapist and has spent more than 7 years in victim services. She's going to be a great leader for the Family Justice Center. But these are the anticipated outcomes that we will see in the Family Justice Center based on the hundreds of other Family Justice Centers that are throughout the country. But there's none in Florida. This will be the only Family Justice Center, the Pinellas County Family Justice Center in the state of Florida. All of these outcomes we do see in Family Justice Centers throughout the country: reduced homicides, reduced re-traumatization, increased victim cooperation, increased prosecution. The evidence is very concrete and real, that this is a game changer for survivors of domestic violence in the county. We are currently finishing up capital improvements, and we will be launching this again in June. And so we do see that this will absolutely change services for survivors in the county. So any questions for me today on the Family Justice Center? Yes, ma'am.
I noticed in the video, because the judges, we do a virtual training just like the lady in the video, and for no one that's done this, by the end of my virtual training, I was willing to go to jail because I wanted to kill my spouse because I was just so confused. I was, you know, they put you in the scenario and you're like this woman, your phone is ringing, and by the end of, a lot of us were out of money by the end of it. So a lot of us went back to our abuser. My question to you is, I noticed that DCF was called. Will there be someone to sit with the, and it could be men or women, because I've seen it both happen.
Absolutely.
But what we see coming in UFC is as follows for the injunction. The CPI told me I had to do it. Legally insufficient. I'm gonna stamp no every time. I may set it for a hearing, but by the time I set it for a hearing, the frustration is already there, so they're not showing up. So will CPI be a part of that in-house where someone will sit in that comfortable room and they can have those conversations?
Absolutely. And the little sheet that I showed you earlier does have some data about, we do have advocates that are working in the child welfare and with CPI, and you can see the increase of referrals and us partnering together to avoid that exact situation. So yes, that work is currently being done, and it'll be strengthened in the Family Justice Center model.
And I'm sorry to ask all of these questions, will that mechanism click at the time of the CPI shelter? Because otherwise, you know, I want to get some of this to put on the benches so that when we're doing our shelter hearings, we're mindful to tell, and that term we're using, alleged victims, because people are innocent until proven guilty. But then we can tell the people that are coming in about the center, because this is a piece that they're missing. They're already broken, and you know, we're trying to decide whether or not to let them keep their children, and they just need help.
Right.
So will this be an early part of the process, do you know?
So yes, I mean, right now we have already engaged the police departments in how are we going to train all of your officers that the process is now different. So that training will be happening, and hopefully they'll get that information when the police officer shows on scene in a different way than they have before. So they will be coming to us that day or the next day, and so they wouldn't have had the chance to have gotten frustrated. But we would love the opportunity to work with you to see where are the rest of those gaps, and that's one of the reasons that we're doing the soft opening in June, is so that we can work out the kinks and where those gaps are before we get into the huge volume of numbers that we do anticipate in October. So we'd love to work with you directly to see where the rest of those gaps are. Any other questions?
I just want to say thank you. There's no greater issue that's plaguing young people than the domestic violence issue and the trauma that they're faced with, and they're trying to carry on. That video is very powerful. So just thank you for the work and for the aggressiveness that you're taking this major task. It's not easy work on, and if there's anything the school district can help, I know we're working and partnering with you, but if there's anything we can do to help that process, please don't hesitate.
Well, thank you, Dr. Gregg. And actually, if I could take a moment to talk about this partnership, the school district will actually be on site at the Family Justice Center as well to make sure that when children are involved in the situations, they're enrolled in a program that they have called Handled with Care, which is a great program that they started. We came on board as a partner, but when there's a child who experiences something like domestic violence, then the school is notified so they can provide support for the child rather than, maybe there's some behaviors that might be punitive otherwise. And so this has been a great partnership, and I will have to say what I have been told, and I don't know this to be true or not, but we're the only county that is partnering in this way in the Handled with Care program with the public school. So definitely something to be proud of, and we're so glad to have you on board as a partner for the Family Justice Center.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Once again, thank you, Lorianne. I know that this has been ongoing for a few years, but there's been a tremendous amount of progress that's made. I remember sitting in on one of the first discussions about where you were thinking, but to get all these partners together, to bring them into one place, and to get even Judge Moore excited about something like this, which is incredibly important. We know. I want to again thank you so much and thank your team for all the hard work that they've done so far and all that we'll do moving forward. Best of luck with this, and again, you know, without saying, we're all here to help. And Karen, thank you again for stepping in for Megan. You can let her know you did a great job. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to the strategic plan update. Linda Leedy, please.
Good morning. Linda Leedy, Chief Administrative Officer. And I'm here to talk about this strategic plan, but I got to tell you, Lariana's video has me in a moment. It was really powerful. So I'm going to switch gears. So I want to give you an update on where we are with progress to the strategic plan. You can see here that through the first quarter of year 2, we are on track. In fact, a little ahead. We have actually completed 27% of our activities with an expectation of 23%. So we're doing quite well. And now I want to break it down by each strategic results area. And I'm going to do this just at the very high level because, as you know, we do deep dives in each one of these strategic result areas in these meetings every month. But in our area of early childhood development, we are moving right along. We've hired our 0 to 3 Strategic Initiatives Manager. You just approved the contract with Vista Communications to get us started on our public awareness campaign. And in the area of quality early learning, you know, we've been doing quality early learning for 10 years now, and our staff took some time to look at the lessons learned from that decade, and now they are incorporating some new requirements, new best practices into our new QELI site that will be in Tarpon Springs, and we'll come back to you in March with an update from that staff as well as a request for a sole source for that location. In the area of school readiness, we've identified tools to monitor and evaluate cognitive, social, and emotional development for children 0 to 5 as part of our stated activities in the plan, and we are working with ELC to implement this later this year. School success, literacy. Our grade level reading campaign continues to work with Lectio and address community efforts to increase literacy. Staff will be back in front of the board in March, providing an update on this initiative for our funded literacy programs and will include school data results. In the area of prevention of child abuse and neglect, JWB released an RFP for a high-quality respite program in December and continues to monitor the efforts of our funded agencies with respect to specifically our fatherhood engagement. Like many of our funded agencies, they are having some challenges with staff recruitment and retention, but we continue to reinforce across all of our programs in this portfolio the importance and JWB's expectation for engagement with fathers throughout their programming and services. Strengthening community. Some of the activities that we had slated for this result area were delayed, as you might imagine, during COVID, because many of those things require face-to-face personal interaction. But we do have community council members that have volunteered to serve on the LOI and RFP evaluation teams that we just talked about earlier, and that is one of our goals, to engage our community members at a higher level. And our staff is on target, currently reviewing best practices for family support services, and we anticipate a recommendation with some additional investments would come to this board as part of our budget process for fiscal year 23. And then in the area of organizational capacity, you can see we didn't hit our target there. And in the last 2 years, we strove to implement 3 new data systems. 2 of them have been successfully launched. 1, not so much. We were transitioning our accounting software program from Great Plains to another vendor, and that has been fraught with some difficulties. We have terminated the contract, and are moving forward to find a new vendor. So that's the main reason that particular result area is behind. But of course, we've also done some activities that are not captured in our strategic plan because we didn't anticipate them as COVID has continued. You know, we've done support for the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, and before that, COVID Cares, and of course, increased support for our hunger efforts in the community. And of course, we've also done some non-COVID work. You're going to hear about in a moment the transition of FSI from 2-in-1 to PEMS as our new screening front door. And then also we've begun some work internally on enhanced internal performance quality improvement to better measure, document, and improve where needed our internal JWB practices to get to some better efficiencies, some more streamlining, to be a little faster at some of the things that we're required to do. So given that the world changes and it's impossible for a strategic plan to anticipate all future needs, we will be doing a slight refresh of the plan in the next 6 months to be able to adjust and incorporate some of these new activities. You know, because in fact, families and children are in crisis is way beyond what we anticipated when we developed the strategic plan. Mental health needs have increased, housing affordability has decreased, homelessness has increased, and of course, there are extreme staffing shortages that are impacting service delivery. So we will be bringing back some modifications to the plan to begin October 1st, which is the beginning of our 3rd year of the strategic plan. So with that, are there any questions?
Seeing none. Thank you so much for that presentation, and let's keep moving. I know the difficulties there are, especially on the accounting software. Hopefully we can move through that quicker than I expect. Okay, let's move on then to the FSI transition update. Beth and Linda.
Well, since I'm here, I'll stay here. And Beth can certainly chime in. Just want to give you an update from our conversation last month about the transition from 2-in-1 to PEMS of our front door for the FSI program. It's not an easy lift to do it in a short time frame that we're working in, but we have been making substantial progress. We completed and executed our notice of intent to award to PEMS, and we have been meeting with PEMS transition teams weekly, more than weekly actually, working together on a budget amendment, trying to nail down the details of finalizing staffing patterns, position profiles, and identifying IT needs. And everybody at this point is still comfortable with the April 1st transition date. You know, the IT piece is the one that might be the one that causes us to have a little hiccup, but at this point, everybody's confident that we can make that date. And of course, we've also been meeting with 2-in-1 to transition out, and you know, they've assured us that they will be able to sustain the continuity of their information and referral services for families through financial support from other funders, and that the number of families that they're referring to the FSI front door at PEMS will be, you know, a small subset of the calls that they get to the family information and referral line. FSI is just going to be one more program that they refer to, just like all the other programs in their database. And I don't know if you have anything to add, Beth, but that's really our update.
Yeah, I think we've seen a robust commitment from PEMS, from their CEO down to the folks who will actually be managing this function. The fact that PEMS has been working with FSI from its very beginning, they really, you know, they know it inside and out, and in fact, the manager who has been in charge of it literally was here at the beginning as well. So they are able to move a few people from other, you know, other responsibilities into this role of being on the phones, and will, we understand, shortly be posting this position itself. But as we, you know, noted before, they want to see a contract before they post positions, and we've in order to do that, we're working with them on budgets for exactly what that will look like. But we're moving at as fast a pace to do that as possible, but we respect their, their desire to have something that's in contract form before they take on some additional responsibilities.
Beth, when do you expect that something in writing for them to proceed with hiring that position will take place?
We're hoping to have the budget completed next week.
Okay.
And that's the piece that we need.
Yeah, the contract amendment really is pretty easy. It just needs that number dropped into it more than anything
So
else.
it's a two-step process, the budget and then the contract
Right.
amendment.
Yeah, although the contract amendment piece is, like I said, it's pretty much ready to go. And we do that via DocuSign, so it moves to whoever it needs to move to pretty quickly.
Right, and it doesn't need to come back to us then?
Correct, because at the last board meeting, this board authorized me to go forward and do this within certain financial constraints that will be fine.
Thank you.
So a thought I didn't really think of when we were talking about this entire process with 211, but 211 is obviously a pretty well-known number locally for help. And I'm wondering, how are we going to advertise this new number? Is it going to be simple? Is it going to be an 800 number? I mean, are we going to have to hire a communications team to get with physicians and hospitals and the schools and everybody else who might be referring people to FSI? That was something that didn't really occur to me, but it seems like a pretty big issue.
Well, I think that, one, as Linda already said, for people who do call 211 as the well-known number, 211 refers to a whole variety of programs within the community depending on the needs and the circumstances of the caller. And so the PIMS number, whatever that number is, will be one of those. So the first calls, if somebody has no idea what any of these programs are, really will still be 211. However, those programs that, those individuals, those programs, those places that encounter families that are likely FSI folks, we will need to push that phone number out to them. And a lot of that ends up not being so much out to the broader community, but to case managers and others who are working on the ground. I'm not saying it'll be easy. To your point, 211 number is much better known and will always be better known. But its purpose is really to take any and all requests for referrals and then direct that individual to the right place. This is one of those right places, but it's not all of them.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner?
Just one question. Will 211 be expected to screen out those people that they know are not eligible, or are they just going to pass them on? Because I guess that was a big issue.
Yeah. Well, no, they won't be doing the screening like they've been doing before. But we will have, like they do for all programs in the community, they'll know what the criteria is for the program, so they shouldn't be referring somebody if they have no employment and they're living in a car. FSI likely isn't going to be the program that's going to be able to help them, so they would not refer that.
We would expect some screening, but at the same level they would do with any other program they refer. Obviously they can't do the same level of screening if we're moving that function somewhere else. And I expect that'll be, we'll be dancing around that a little bit. It's going to take a little time to get that to work as, in the way we'd like it to work.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you for the presentation. Let's move on to St. Vincent de Paul Family Bridge Shelter update. Jennifer Ortega.
There we go. All right. So Jennifer Ortega, Associate Manager of Program Administration here at JWB. We are here today to provide the board an update of action taken last year regarding our investment of funds for emergency shelter for families in Pinellas County. I want to, before I get started, acknowledge our community partners that are essential to this work that are here with us today. We have Amy Foster, the CEO of the Homeless Leadership Alliance, as well as Jana Bilecki, the Chief of Homeless Services at St. Vincent de Paul. So to provide a little bit of a recap from where we started, prior to December of last year, JWB's investment in emergency shelter for children and families was completed through several place-based efforts. We had an investment in Grace House, which is operated by Hope Villages of America, as well as shelter beds that were offered through our Family Services Initiative, provided by the St. Petersburg Free Clinic, as well as St. Vincent de Paul. Q1 of last year, we became aware that following a strategic planning decision of St. Petersburg Free Clinic, that they were no longer going to provide services through their family residence, which we used as some of those FSI shelter beds. Around the same time, there was also a decision made by this board to cease our funding in the Grace House programming. So in light of those two changes in the community and in an effort to maintain as much capacity as possible, this board approved a reallocation of those dollars to St. Vincent de Paul. In February of 2021, we executed a revised agreement to support the Bridging Families program. Bridging Families as a program structure offers emergency shelter in a few ways. They look at physical shelter offerings that we're probably most familiar with, but they also utilize non-congregate shelter options. So scattered site hotels as well as master leases as an option. And a master lease is the concept by where St. Vincent's is holding that lease with a particular landlord, and then they can manage a flow of families through there as needed. When we shifted to that investment structure, we did so, the Pinellas County was an existing partner through the Homeless Leadership Alliance, as was the city of St. Petersburg. So implementation efforts. So since the time that we had this last in front of the board and you made the reallocation, we worked with the provider to make sure our funding structure really aligned and supported what was needed to deliver services. We also looked at how families flowed and accessed those services when there was a need. Simultaneously, the program worked on staffing and infrastructure building of that capacity and developing additional relationships with hotels throughout Pinellas County. The map on the right is a map of their current non-congregate shelter options, so those scattered site hotels. This does not represent any other providers who are also providing housing services in Pinellas County. So I just want to make sure we're clear about that. An example of those would be Grace House, which is continuing to be operational, is in North County. We have some family units available through the Salvation Army, as well as Directions for Living was also providing non-congregate shelter options up until recently when that funding was depleted. The map does show you and there isn't a legend, so I'll kind of walk you through that. The stars, the yellow stars represent where the staff offices are located. So there's one mid-county and then South County. The orange is where we currently have families placed in a hotel. And then the blue triangles, I think they are, reflect other hotels that are under partnership with St. Vincent's that could be accessed if a family presented for housing in that geographical area. We'll acknowledge that there's certainly work to be done to move some of those access points further north. However, with those other partners that have had a more northern footprint, and when we looked at the data that's been provided, the families that are presenting for services and doing an intake with St. Vincent's have been close in that geographic area. So it's something for us to definitely keep an eye on. Excuse me. So this next slide provides you an overview of specifically JWB's investments over time. When we're looking at FY20 and 21, the caution is that not all of those services offered the same scope of work, the same supports, the same length of stays, or even had the same funding models. Where we are in FY '22 represents that reallocation, and we are targeted this year for the program to serve 145 families, which if they reach that, and they're about 47% through Q1, just to give you an idea, so it may likely exceed that target. Over 450 individuals would be served, and we expect at least 300 of those to be children. Another note in some of those in terms of targets and numbers served is what we are seeing on the ground is a longer length of stay than maybe we had in previous years, which kind of takes us to the next slide. So this, where the map provided specific services for St. Vincent's, this provides you a better look at the community capacity as a whole. And we did it in a few ways to show how that capacity is changing over time. November of '21, we were at 120 available units for families. That did include those directions non-congregate shelter beds that I just mentioned, that funding was fully utilized, and those are starting to fall off. The current system, we're at 68 units. And bridging families, that final row there is a subset of that 68. So the bridging families units really represent the 44 of that 68. So longer length of stay, lowered capacity, and with the work of Amy and her team at HLA, we know that as of this week, we have 50 unduplicated, unique families, literally homeless, waiting for the next available shelter bed. So our work definitely continues, and this is all happening as we face, those rising housing costs, lack of affordable housing, especially for our families with low or moderate income. So we continue to face those challenges, but I do want to end before opening it up to questions, really talking about some of the strengths that have come up out of the past year, which has been a lot of collaboration between various funders and jurisdictions, a lot of partnership work even among providers as we figure out how do we meet the needs of our changing community. Some of those is looking at the whole system and how families flow through that system, which is what is allowed us to really say that we know we have 50 today that are out there waiting for services. Limiting those barriers, keeping an eye on that prevention and diversion whenever possible. Some of that speaks to the efforts of the Family Services Initiative that we just talked about. In addition to system efforts, there are some new opportunities coming down the line. Some of you may be aware that the city of St. Pete is wrapping up an RFP for $2.5 million for 2 years for additional non-congregate shelter units in St. Pete. They expect those to hopefully come online starting maybe late spring, early summer, the last I was informed. The county is also actively re-procuring their non-congregate shelter beds. And then we continue to have those ongoing jurisdiction meetings and meetings of the Funders Council of the HLA as we continue to look at this and monitor what's happening in our community. We're hopeful that those will continue in order to support our children and families who are experiencing homelessness when it has been unavoidable. With that, I will open it up to any questions.
Susan?
Oh, just a clarification on that last slide. It's the first time I've seen in writing the City of St. Petersburg Scattered Family Shelter. Is that the non-congregate living that you just mentioned?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I think their preference may be to do more of the master lease type apartments, but it would be those master leases or probably those hotels.
Is that a new initiative of the City of St. Pete?
They released it, Amy, I think it was due January 20th. I know that applications were due. So they're currently in review for selection.
It's using ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act dollars. So this is limited, it's one-time funding. This will not solve the problem long-term, but it is a gap, measure with American Rescue Plan Act dollars.
Okay. And I'm curious, are there any other cities following suit?
Amy, do you have?
Good morning. So the city of Clearwater currently has, or I think it closed on Friday, home ARPA dollars available. Non-congregate shelter is an available activity with those HUD dollars that could be applied for. I don't foresee that that will be something that will be a successful bid because I think their total pot of money is like 1.6 million. The county certainly has a significant number of ARPA dollars as well as home ARPA dollars. They have not released those yet. But I think there are lots of opportunity with all of the jurisdictions that are entitlement communities that will receive that federal funding. Some of the challenges I will mention around non-congregate shelter in particular with that funding source is that the building must be acquired and rehabbed and opened in less than 6 months. So if people are not planning those investments now, the likelihood of being able to program those dollars will be challenging. And so this idea of master leases and hotels for non-congregate shelter is our most likely strategy in order to increase the units.
Understood. Thank you. I really appreciate the extra effort to explain that to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I guess my only question is, it's great to see that St. Petersburg is acting quickly, and that Clearwater may have some options. The 6 months kind of concerns me because of the fact of just shortages in general. I mean, getting building materials and other things alike. I don't know how that happens, but I guess one of my real question is I see the gap up in North County. I know I know there's some work that's being done up there, and we don't know so much about anymore about what Grace and others might be, but it just looks so barren on the map. And I'm assuming, I have to assume that there are equal needs up past Clearwater. Do we have any other information or data on that?
So I think we're going to continue to see that evolve. One of the things that so the other providers are there and those aren't represented. Directions, their non-congregate did have a very heavy North Pinellas footprint. So I think that is part of, where people were naturally flowing to. However, what Amy and her team have been able to do, and you can certainly lean in, Amy, is really kind of get those providers to agree to kind of consolidate all those wait lists and consolidate the front door into shelter. So that's Amy and her team is trying to deduplicate those lists, have a little bit of a risk scoring of those families so we can really look and see when there's no room at the inn, right, when there's a wait list for shelter, who's that next most vulnerable family that should get that next bed. And that's kind of going to change, I think, a little bit of where people end up in shelter at based on how they triage that to meet the family's needs. So I think there's going to be a little bit more pairing of community-wide, who's next on the list, who's most vulnerable versus next bed overall in the community. I don't know if there's more you want to share.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I would mention about that is Jennifer's absolutely right. That North County footprint was really covered by other providers. That money ran through the Homeless Leadership Alliance, but was provided by Department of Children and Families, ESGCV, which is COVID dollars. Those dollars are now out, which is why you see that footprint shrinking. However, I can tell you that every day, weekly, I am calling DCF saying, if there are other communities that have not spent their allocation, we are ready and willing to take those for prevention dollars. We don't want children to come into the homeless system if they don't need to, or for additional non-congregate shelter. But we are seeing that even in the 50 families we have right now, that footprint is pretty far south. We had a family just this week that Grace House graciously had a bed available. Family went there, but we have a lot of grandparents who are caring for their grandchildren. And so even though the children are in school somewhere else and towards North County, their doctor's appointments, the grandparents' doctor's appointments are in South County. And they said, I'll go there because that's the bed that's available, but it's really not the best fit for my family. And if you can move me at some point, we'd like that. So I think through this, really understanding, instead of there being a list at Grace House and a list at St. Vincent de Paul and a list at 211 and everybody keeping their own list. By us managing that process, I think we'll have a much better picture of where the true needs are and what are those gaps that we aren't able to provide right now.
Great, thanks for that explanation. That helps a bit. Okay, are there any other questions or comments? If none, thank you so much for the presentation. Beth, I'll turn over the Chief Executive Officer report to you.
Okay. Well, last Wednesday, for Children's Week at our state capitol, Representative Chris Latvala, Chair of the House Education and Employment Committee, presented a House tribute, otherwise known as Exhibit A, a real tribute, to the Juvenile Welfare Board, marking its 75th anniversary, and marking that milestone of our nation's first independent board enacted to guard the rights and needs of children and to invest in their futures. The tribute acknowledged that JWB was created by courageous leaders here in our community who were the first to collectively make children a priority, and it should be a point of pride for Pinellas County and for the state of Florida. Esteemed dignitaries, including Representative Latvala, members of the JWB board, and executive leadership were at a reception in the Capitol building to commemorate JWB's 75th anniversary and to receive that House, we received that House tribute from them. JWB Board Chair Mike McCurrick and Board Member Jim Milliken were up with us working the halls and meeting folks and were there for the tribute, as well as executive leadership. So we conducted multiple legislative visits, including meeting with Representative Latvala, Senator Roussan, Senator Hooper, Senator DeSigley, and Representative Diamond. Plus, we attended several committee meetings focused on early learning and kindergarten through 12 education, as well as an event hosted by Amplify Clearwater, otherwise known as the Clearwater Chamber. I want to do a shout out to Becca Teeter, wave to the crowd, Becca, who is new in this role of our public policy, and to say that she worked us all hard and knew how to get us in and out of places would be an understatement. I would also add, just on a lighter note, we arranged to have JWB cookies with us for the reception, and they're very beautifully done and with our logo on the front. And they not only worked, I mean, who doesn't like cookies, at the reception, but then we dropped them off in various legislator offices and anybody we came in contact with, and then, which was very helpful. 3 of us driving back, Linda drove 3 of us back, and in the dark we had a flat tire. We're able to pull off to a safe place that was well lit, but a few folks who came by to assist us also got cookies. So, you know, we made a lot of mileage out of those cookies. For the second year in a row, Juvenile Welfare Board's accounting team was awarded GFOA's, the Government Financial Officer Association's Certificate of Achievement for Financial Reporting. You may remember that last year we received that for the first time, and it was fairly unusual to do it your first time out. So this was for our fiscal year 20 JWB Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, which you can find on our website on the budget and financial page. There is a picture online. Brian has stepped out, but we see Brian beaming because he was chair of the board for that fiscal year 19 that for which we first received this. So let's see, that award or that certificate was established in 1945 to encourage and assist state and local governments to go beyond the minimal requirements of generally accepted accounting principles, and it encourages preparation of annual comprehensive financial reports that evidence the spirit of transparency and full disclosure and then recognizes governments like ours that succeed in achieving that goal. And it is kind of, interesting that, fun fact, 1945 was also the year that the legislation was first introduced to create the Juvenile Welfare Board, which was overwhelmingly supported by voters in the 1946 referendum. So please join me in congratulating Laura, Lynn, and all JWB staff involved in documenting and submitting our award-winning comprehensive annual financial report. Then I have a few save the dates, please remember. The first is our Children's Summit, which we have had annually last year and this year are virtual. So this year, that will be on Friday, February 18th. All board members are encouraged to join us for the summit. It will be from 8:30 to 10:30 that morning. This summit is virtual, and its theme is Restoring Hope, so very much focused on children's mental health. The summit will feature a robust panel-style presentation titled Growing Hope, Protecting Youth Mental Health. We'll have two different expert panels, one speaking to the current state of youth mental health from a national, state, and a local perspective, and the other sharing successful efforts and initiatives underway to protect youth mental health, including, and I'll say something nice about him since he left, but including the school system. So we will have someone from the school system on one of those panels. And then we will also hear a moving testimonial from Tampa native Johnny Crowder, who overcame adverse childhood experiences to become a successful entrepreneur as the founder and CEO of Cope Notes. And then we'll round out the program with a call to action for advocacy. But we think it will be a fast-moving, engaging time, and we'll include our always famous annual report video, a look back at our work and accomplishments over the last fiscal year. So that's one event, Friday, February 18th, the Children's Summit. And the second is our 75th anniversary awards luncheon. So this is the first time we have done this in this format. And that will be Friday, April 29th. Please save that date, 11:30 to 1:30. And this, we hope, will be in person at the St. Pete Coliseum, which, for those of you who know the Coliseum, know that it's physically big and airy, so we will not overcrowd it. This special event will honor our 2021 Kids First Cooperman Bogue awardees, the Spence Education recipients, and we will announce the winner of the inaugural Dillinger McCabe Leadership Award. So as per our usual practice, current and former board members are invited to serve on our honorary host committee with an opportunity to host a table and invite other individuals to come. So board members will receive additional details next week, and we'll also plan to send out actual save-the-date invitations at that time. And that's all I have, unless there are other questions of me.
Questions or comments? I do have one that's just basically to say that the trip to Tallahassee was incredibly well orchestrated, and we were able to get a lot of input back from state senators and representatives, and we also made, I think, a great impact there in talking about not only our 75th, but getting the visibility that JWB needs to have. I want to again thank Becca, because if you have an opportunity to go up to Tallahassee with Becca, please do. You will be just amazed how all the people she doesn't know now that she knows. By the time you would all get there, she probably knows everybody. But she makes such an impact, and she's able to finesse her way through pretty much any office, anywhere, at any time, including the fact that she was able to work her magic with the state security groups, so that she really had no issue. Everyone else had to empty their pockets and move everything and ensure that they didn't have anything. Becca was able to move forward with her laptops and other things without a problem, because they all knew who she was. So again, I want to thank you for all your hard work and everything you've done. April as well, for orchestrating this. I think it was well put together, and I believe it's going to pay major or provide major impact back to the visibility of all the great work over the past 75 years and in the future that the JWB has been doing and will do. So again, thank you so much. All right, let's move on to the information items. If are there any questions or comments on the information? Seeing none, do we have any open agenda comments or
Yes,
requests?
we have one card. It's Tracy Weeking from Hope Village of America. I hope I said that last name correctly.
Tracy, the floor is yours.
Just three quick things. I'll give the floor right back to you. I'm Tracy Wicking. I just wanted to introduce myself to you. I kind of snuck in the side door of the service provision community in Pinellas County a couple years ago as COVID was walking up the front sidewalk. So I am the Vice President of the Abuse Services Division at Hope Villages of America and the Executive Director at the Haven, which is the Shelter and Outreach Services for Domestic Violence survivors. And I just wanted to also extend my thank you to you all for your continued support for the Haven and the work that we're doing there. Also want to thank Jennifer Arteaga, Megan Seals, and now Joanne DeLernia. Did I say her name right? Yes. All right. Who is our new liaison that we're working with there. And also to thank Lariana and Sherry and Gabriella for all the work that they provide over at CASA and for Lariana's leadership, not only locally but at the state level as well. And then finally, kind of seeing is believing. Just want to make sure you all are invited to come by anytime you'd like to come visit the shelter or outreach services and see all the things that we're doing there too. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Any others? All right. Beth, anniversaries.
All right. Well, it's hard to believe, but it has been 1 year since Barbara Morrison Rodriguez joined us. So as our first anniversary. Braxton Everett has been with us 3 years. Millicent Battle, 6 years. Linda Leedy, 7 years. Diana Caro, 10 years. Karen Woods, 11 years. And Yaritas Garcia, 15 years. We congratulate all of them.
Thank you for that. You can see the future meetings that are listed. Beth has talked to you about our upcoming events. So if we have no other, any other things to speak about, then I will call this meeting adjourned.